All right. Well, thanks for joining us, folks. We like to have some fun here at RecPoker. It is the third Wednesday of the month, which means it's time for the Unshuffled Mixed Game Q&A demo. That's what we're doing tonight with Jake Hirschfield, who I'm happy to have back. We do this every month in this same time slot, and we look at a different mixed game every month. And Jake uses his fantastic program, Unshuffled, to demonstrate the mechanics of the game. And we talk a little bit about the strategy and how to get the most out of it. And mixed games are so much fun; they're the future of the game. And so I'm glad we're doing more of this kind of stuff with RecPoker in 2022. So Jake, why don't you just tell us like a sentence or two about Unshuffled for folks that might not know if this is their first session that they're catching up with, how they can hook up with you, and then let's get into some mixed games, man.
Sounds good. Yeah. So Unshuffled is a for free web platform. It's unshuffled.io, and it's a place where you can play poker in multiple ways. You can host a room with your friends, and you can build your own games, which is what we'll be doing today. You can play in daily challenges or weekly challenges, which are ongoing. We'll have them going. You can just jump in. You can play 20 hands, and if you are at the top of the chip getter at the end of the week, then you win $20 Amazon gift cards or 25 or even more. And then soon we'll be launching our Unshuffled Cup series, which is a season similar to that Unshuffled Challenge series, but it's duplicate poker where every player is playing against the same AI with the same cards. And we're going to try and determine which player plays their cards or the cards the best. So we'll all be playing on a level playing field against the exact same opponents. And that's kind of a new thing that we're working on, and technically very challenging, but we're really excited to launch it eventually.
Yeah, well, it's great. And I got to say, I've played in the challenges. They're fun. And just in case you think you're going crazy listening back there in the audience, that's right. They're free to enter and you can win real cash prizes. So if you like fun or you're a life nit like me, you should really be signing up for some of these free challenges over at unshuffled.io. Thanks, Jake.
Cool. With that, I will go ahead and share my screen. And we'll go to Unshuffled. And we'll get started. So today we are playing Limit Omaha 8 or better, if I'm not mistaken. So, like I said before, on Unshuffled, you can create and build your own games. So we have an Omaha template. Limit Omaha is played with the same whole cards and flop cards, just a couple differences with the rules. But I'll go ahead and make the game just for the sake of going through the exercise. We'll start with a blank board, and Limit Omaha is played where each player is dealt 4 whole cards face down, so only they can see them. And then there are 5 community cards. So we've got the flop, which is 3, the turn, and the river.
I love the way that this program is so great, because this is actually how you'd be dealing it out at home. Like it really maps onto like you and your friends learning how to play poker with a real deck. So this is very cool. Like, always enjoyed this.
That's right. And then we'll go to the deal order. And in the deal order, we will select the whole cards to come out first. We could, if we wanted to, say, hey, for deal number 2, I want the flop to come. And then for deal 3, and these come after every betting round. You'll see with Unshuffled, when you create and play custom games, the dealer actually has to say, start betting round, select winner, because we don't necessarily know the rules of the game you're playing. You might be playing, Omaha with 7 flop cards or 5 extra cards or whatever it might be. We don't have the ability to program in burn cards, and I personally like when there is a burn in the game. So what I'm going to do is only do the player cards, and I won't touch the deal order for the community cards. Custom settings, we'll leave it alone as a standard game, and we'll just call this Omaha or Limit Omaha 8 or better. And we'll click save, and then we'll go back home. We'll go ahead and host our game. I'm going to change our buy-in to 100 and make that the min and max, so you can't vary there. Normally we do a turn timer, but since we're going to talk through all this stuff, I'm not going to do that. We will turn dealer's choice on. I will go blinds, and then I will do 1 and 2. We're playing a limit game. In Unshuffled right now, we don't actually have the ability to turn on limit, although it's something we're working on. But the rules of limit are pretty simple. There's fixed limits for how much you can bet. There is the small bet and the big bet. And the small bet is equal to the big blind, and the big bet is 2x the big blind. In the first 2 betting rounds, you can bet in increments of the small bet, and in the last betting round, you can bet in increments of the big bet, and that's it. That's all you don't have any extra. You can't raise more than that. You can't go all in, which really changes the game and makes it kind of fun. And actually, you end up having a lot more people staying in more hands because there's less opportunity to lose a lot of money in every hand, although that can bite you in the butt later on. So just be careful. We have a couple other things. You can add progressions to the intervals for the blinds to raise if you wanted the game to kind of progress if you're playing with a bunch of friends. We do have pot limit, and then table stakes, which most of the time we don't use, but some groups like to not worry about a buy-in. They just set the table stakes, and if you go negative, you just go negative. You keep playing, you don't have to rebuy in. All right, so we'll go ahead and click play now. You just copy the link and share it with your friends. I'm just gonna have one other player to join because it's I think easier to explain the rules of the game. We'll do I'm just going to type in the room code on the homepage. Is a place for the room code. You don't even have to have an account to play. So this player is going to join in as a guest account, and they'll have some kind of goofy name. Aces in the hole. That's one of the guest user accounts that we just create for you. And then we'll go ahead and click start game.
So Jake, if I was hosting the game, I would go in as the dealer, set this all up, and then I could just send that code to anybody I wanted, and they wouldn't have to have an account already. They could just click on that, enter that code, and come join me in the game.
That's exactly right. And we have a max of 8 players right now.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll see here, we've gone over this before, but there's a little space. Do you see this weird like circle thing? That is one of my external cameras on my device, but we have video and audio integrated into our platform. I will turn on video for the other device. You guys can see. Just take 1 second.
Yeah, this is a cool feature where it really recreates that social atmosphere of playing in the same room. You can see each other and talk to each other, and so you get that benefit from it, which is great.
It had to quit out of my Chrome, unfortunately, so I will be right back here into Unshuffled. So take 2 seconds.
Yeah, take your time, Jake. We try and not do many things live because every time you try and do something live, there's always some sort of computer error, or I mess up a sound cue or something like that. So I think you only have to worry if it goes really smoothly, because that means something's coming. So I think we're right on track now. Hey, there you go.
There we go. Now we have the video in the circle.
Nice.
Pretty simple. The one thing that we often see is people have their browser permissions. They don't allow for the browser to actually connect to your computer's video. So you just have to know how to turn that back on, which is what I just had to do.
Nice.
But I'll go ahead and turn my camera off for the sake of this because we don't need it. And we'll go ahead and click start hand. We can scroll down to, these are all the different games we have on Unshuffled. These are the ones that are pre-populated. The auto games, Unshuffled will handle all the dealing, the winner selection, everything for you. And then these ones all below are all the games that I've created. You can see I've got quite a few, some kind of goofy games. But we're going to select this one that we created.
Yeah, right.
And
I haven't played spaghetti, so you'll have to teach me later.
Nice.
We've got on Unshuffled, we have a TikTok, and our TikTok has all the rules for these games that I've created. So, but I'll go over that game some other time in a YouTube video, and I'll send it over to the RecPoker community.
Awesome.
Cool. Click load, and the game we created will deal. And so you can see we have our 4 cards. Our opponent has 4 cards. The small and the big blind have been dealt, and we've got these controls as the dealer. Let's talk about Limit Omaha really quick. The game is played just like regular Omaha. It's 4 cards each player. There's a betting round. Then the flop is dealt, another betting round, the turn, and then another betting round. The turn, then the river, and then one final betting round, and then the cards are revealed and you select the winners. Unlike regular Omaha, Limit Omaha 8 or better has those rules with the betting that I talked about before. And it also has 2 bets going or 2 pots going in every hand. There's the low hand, which is the 8 or better part, and the high hand, which is just regular Omaha. Now, the 8 or better is a little confusing if you've never done it before, but it's not too difficult once you grasp the way that the game works and the way that the rules work. The 8 is a qualifier, meaning in order to have a low hand, you must have 5 cards that are less than 8, and aces are included as high or low. So aces are really valuable in Limit Omaha because it can be a high card and it can be a low card.
So when we say 8 or better, we actually mean 8 or lower, essentially.
Correct.
Yeah, got it.
Correct.
You can't have any cards higher than an 8 to qualify for the low.
That's correct.
But an 8 does count.
8 does count. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, straights and flushes don't mean anything for the low hand, but they do matter for the high hand. And you cannot have any paired cards for the low hand. So you see, I have 2 2s here. That doesn't mean I have 2 qualifying 2s for my low. That means, in fact, I can only use one of them. But it's good because I know, there's one less 2 for the other people to have, which is nice.
And if you've got the low straight, let's say, it doesn't count as the low, but does that low straight count as a straight for the high hand?
In
like,
8
could you scoop?
It depends on the rules. In 8 or better, and maybe I'm incorrect on this, but I believe that a low straight ace 2 3 4 5 does qualify for a low. It's just not a straight.
Right.
But it does qualify as a straight for the high. So it is a scoop.
Okay,
It's
cool.
called a wheel, and it could be the high and the low.
Exactly.
There we go. Cool.
There are some variations where they don't allow straights for the low either. Where ace the wheel the nuts low would be ace 2 3 4 6.
Right.
And if it's suited, it's a steel wheel.
Yes.
I love that. I love that.
The trickiest part. Go ahead, Jim.
But if you had like 2 3 4 5 6 without the ace, that would still qualify for the low. But would that also in that case qualify for the high, or does it not?
It would still qualify.
Okay,
it would be
cool.
straight. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be the nut low because you wouldn't have the ace.
Correct.
Okay, I understand. Thanks. That's really helpful.
The trickiest part with the low hands when you're competing with like 8 other people is determining which low hand beats the other if you have a lot of similar cards. And the easiest way to think about it is you qualify low hands from the highest card down. So if 2 players have an 8, then you go to the next card. And if 2 players have a 7, you go to the next card. And if one of those players has a 4 and the other player has a 6, the 4 is the lower hand and that wins.
Cool.
Okay, so let's go ahead and play. We don't dislike our hand at all. We have the ace and the 2, which gives us a chance at the nuts low, and we have an ace and a jack, which isn't terrible. It's not great for high in this game, especially if you're playing with a lot of people. But in a heads-up scenario, not too bad. So we'll go ahead and click betting round. We'll go ahead and just call with both players. But let's just say I did want to raise. I would have to raise in an increment of 2 because remember we're playing limit poker. And the small bet is equal to the big blind, which is 2. So you know what? Why don't we just bet 2? And this player could raise if they wanted, but it would be a raise of 2 as well. So if we raise, then it would be 2 to me, a total bet of 4 from that player. So we can just call, and now we move on.
Is there a betting round? Can you only raise like 4 times or something, or?
It depends on the table you're playing at. Typically, there is a limit to the number of times you can raise in any given betting round. But again, it really varies. The most I think the standard is 4 or 5, but I don't play enough of this variation of Omaha to know. Typically, I play no limit, 8 or better, high low, which I think is what you would see more commonly. But this game is really fun as well.
Generally, they cap at 5.
5.
Okay,
that makes sense.
All right, so we've got our first betting round done. We can do the flop now. We'll burn 1 card, and we'll do 1, 2, 3. Okay, so before we go forward, I'm glad this was the flop. I'm going to actually take one of these cards away and put in a new one in a second. But because the game is 8 or lower, 8 or better, and We only have 2 low cards by definition because we can only use 2 cards for each hand. And we know already that there's only going to be potentially at max 2 low cards on the board. There will be no low pot for this hand. Impossible. So sort of rule of thumb, there must be at least 1 low card in the flop for there to be a low pot in the hand. I'd like to demonstrate with a low card. So I'm just going to remove this queen and bring in another card until we can get at least 1 low card. Okay, great.
Perfect.
7. We would do another betting round. This betting round, again, you can only bet the small bet. So we'll do a small bet from this player and we'll just call with this player. Right now, we're kind of looking at maybe the low hand. It's not looking great because we would need 2 more low cards, but who knows? We'll go ahead and burn 1 card and hopefully we get a low card. Okay, we did. And it helps us because it's not a 2 or an ace. We'll go ahead and do another betting round. This betting round, now we bump to the large bet.
Right.
Because it's the third betting round. So this player decides, okay, I'm going to bet the large bet. And if we want to raise, because we like where we're at, we're going to raise, and it's a raise of 4. This is the total bet, 8. 4 on top of 4 is 8. And then we'll call with this player. Okay, we're happy. We're all good. Final card. Oops, we didn't burn. That's why I like to burn cards. Okay, we got our 8.
Hey, all right.
Perfect. Okay. So we have.
Sorry, Jake. I got one more question. Is this we have to use exactly 2 cards from our hand for this game as well?
You have to use exactly 2 cards, but you can use any 2 cards for the low and any 2 cards for the high.
Okay, great, cool.
You don't have to use the same 2 cards for both.
Great.
So okay, so we're looking at let's just say we're looking at this hand. Let's do one more betting round. This player will check, and we're deciding, how good is our hand. We have a low hand, and it's a pretty good one. Ace 2, 3, 7, 8. If someone has a low of 6, then with a 6 in it, we're going to lose because remember we go from high to low. But as far as the high hand goes, there's a flush draw. There's a couple of paired cards, potential for a straight. So we're not looking great on the high. That's okay. We're going to just stay in the hand for the low. So we check, and now we flip our cards and we decide who the winner is.
And how do we declare whether we're going for the high or the low or both or that kind of stuff?
I don't know how it is played live. I've seen online, it's usually done automatically. They'll just qualify you for both always.
Oh, okay.
And I'm pretty sure in these games you are just in both if you have the hand. It's not a declaration game.
It's not like a chip. You have a chip in your hand, and the color of the chip or the number of the chips is the high or the low.
I don't think so. Although we do have those games on Unshuffled. I'd love to show you guys how that works on Unshuffled one day.
Cool. Okay, so we're just automatically sort of entered in the running for whatever the high or the low.
Correct.
Both. Yeah. Okay.
So let's just look at the low first. We have, as we know, ace 2, 3, 7, 8, and that's it. Ace 2, 3, 7, 8. That's 5. That's a low. Cool. This player has ace 3, 4, 7, 8. Okay. So this is really interesting because we do have the 2, but because they have, if we compare the cards next to each other, it's 8, 8 for both of us, 7, 7 for both of us. And then we go to 3 and he goes to 4 because he can't use his 3.
Right.
And so we're going to win the low because we have the 3 and he has the 4. Now, if we look at the high hand, we both have aces. We both have a pair of 9s. He has 2 pair, aces and 3s, or 9s and 3s with an ace kicker. And we have just 9s with an ace and not much else.
Oh, because we can't use.
We have the 9s and 2s.
9s and 2s, yeah.
Right, sorry, we have 9s and 2s. Thank you. But
Yep.
9s, that's where the game gets a little confusing because there's a lot of different.
Yeah, because you could use the pair there. So we've got 9s and 2s to the 8, right?
Yes.
Because we can't use the jack or the ace. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
So he's going to win the high.
Yep.
And this is a split pot. It's a perfect example of this game. So we would go end hand. We would select our winners. We won the low. He won the high. We'll go distribute pot. 50-50. If it were 3 players, we would have a player. You could do 25%. We've got some quick math here for you just in case. You go ahead and click payout and end hand. And the dealer button will move and it will be the next player's turn to deal.
That is pretty neat, man. Like, I gotta say that it does, like, that's exactly how we would be doing it. You've done a great job putting these flow together. That's awesome.
And that's it. And that's Omaha, limit Omaha 8 or better. Now on
Nice.
Unshuffled, we do have no limit Omaha 8 or better as an auto game, in which case you wouldn't have to do the like deciding who won, who was the low, who was the high. At the end of the hand, Unshuffled would automatically reveal all of your cards and pick the winner of both hands, both pots.
And Jake, those are for all the games that sort of you've pre-programmed into Unshuffled. It knows how to do that. But because you can also just teach Unshuffled how to play your own games that you play with your friends or that you made up, it obviously doesn't know how to do that. So you have to kind of do that for it. That's
right. In one day, what we hope to do is make that template creation workflow robust enough to where you could actually tell it, high-low game, 5 cards, how many cards can you use from the community, from your hand and the community. And then we get to a point where players would be making their own auto games all the time. And we'd have this huge repository of all these different poker games that anyone can pick and choose from, which would be pretty cool, but we're not there yet.
All right. Well, I know we've only got you for a little bit longer, so let's talk a little about sort of some strategies, some starting hands. So I guess, what are some qualities of a 4-card hand that make them good starting hands for a game like this?
Aces are super valuable in any 8 or better game that allows for aces to be high or low.
Yep.
Or the reason that we were talking about earlier, for scooping, you have the wheel. It's a really valuable low card, and obviously it's the highest high card. I think one thing to keep in mind when you're playing this game is with the low hand as you get more players is not always going to be there. And you always have to be wary of the fact that you can only use 2 cards from your hand and you have to use 3 cards from the board, because you may think you have a great low hand and then you realize I was counting 3 instead of 2.
Right.
Which happens way more often than you would think.
Yeah, for sure. I've totally done that. Or you see the 4 flush on the board and you're like, oh, I've got the ace of diamonds.
Right.
It's like, oh, wait a second. I'm not playing no limit hold'em. Yeah.
The other thing I would say, which happened in that example hand for our opponent is, and that was pretty unlucky for them because it went all the way to the 3rd card, but low hands are only as good as the highest card in the low hand.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Counting from the top down as opposed to from the bottom up. That really changes how you value like the 2s and 3s in your hand, because you're more likely to end up playing like the 5 or the 6 kind of thing.
That's right. And that's something that I think a lot of beginner players playing in low poker get a little like trigger happy when they have the low qualifying hand, and they think there aren't that many low qualifying hands. I have an ace, a 2, and a 3. This is great. But then their high qualifiers are 7 and 8, and their ace is the only card in their community cards, and the 2 and the 3 were both on the flop. Everyone has 2 or 3.
Right.
And so their qualifying cards aren't quite that low, actually, when it comes to the low hand. It really depends on how many people you're going up against. If you're going heads up, then any low hand is probably a good hand, but you got to think about it. It's important to think about. There's a lot of different things to consider when you're playing in a high-low game.
And then high would be a lot like Omaha, where like split suit is good and connected is good.
Yes. I think in Omaha, typically you would expect slightly better hands to win these games. Connected is great, split suited is okay, but I would tend to lean higher to the higher odd hands, higher face cards, high connecting suits, mostly because you've got a lot of people playing and a lot of different variations with being able to use any 2 cards from your 4 cards You don't necessarily have to use 2 for both the low and the high. And in a limit game in particular, you're going to have a lot of people playing with maybe not as good as stuff, but might get connected later on in the hand. They might stay longer than you would expect because there's less chips to lose probably, or potentially. So that's just one thing to consider. I don't play this game that often, so these are sort of things that I've thought about myself. It would be good to hear from someone who plays a lot, sort of what they think about this game and the strategies that go along with it, because I don't play that much limit poker in general, let alone limit 8 or better.
Yeah, well, I'll let Eric and Kathy think a little bit about if they have any input there. I know limit game is often a game of discipline because you can't make those big bets to come from behind when you hit your set kind of thing in the same way. You can't like make those huge over bets and all in. So it's pre-flop hand selection becomes really important, and not making those raises with big bets when you really should just be calling. And like exercising discipline in your betting seems to be a constant for a lot of these limit games that you can't make it up out of nowhere. I know that for sure. Eric, do you play any limit?
Just what we do in the home game. I'm not really. But my problem with limit is you always have the right pot odds to call.
Right.
So I call too much, I think is my problem.
Well, it sounds like you call correctly, but it just.
Well, yeah, but you end up playing every hand. It's like, well, I have a gapper here. I could call my gut shot because I got the odds to call.
Well, that's a good question, Jake. Like, how do you combat that? Like, should we just be calling every time we're getting the right price for a draw? Because that kind of makes sense from a math point of view.
I think a good limit player would say no, because most inexperienced players are going by that logic and are going to call a lot and stay in a lot of hands. But on the same token, if you have not necessarily a draw, but an okay high pair, and you've read your opponents at your table and you see they've been doing exactly that, that may give you a little more freedom to stick in the hands with, maybe not the greatest, maybe like a mid pair on the table, but you see there is a draw, and this player has been, calling these gut shots all night. I'm going to stay in because the odds of them getting him aren't that high, and I know that they've been doing it all night, and I think I'm going to win with my mid pair. It's a tricky question. You're right. Because the odds are almost always in your favor. But that's a really good way to bleed your chips really, really quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I guess in these 4-card games, the absolute strength of your hand, that the winning hand kind of gets promoted as well a bit. Like when you get to choose any 2 of your 4 cards, one pair isn't going to win as often as it does in no limit hold'em. You're going to need higher straights, higher flushes. Those are going to be the kind of hands that
that's right.
More often. Yeah.
That's exactly right. The other thing I would say that's important to note is chip stack and relative chip stack aren't really that relevant in any limit game. We've talked about this before, but some high chip stack player at a table can't just shove the rest of the players into the pot because they've got all these, they're so outmatched because there's a limit to how much they can bet. So that kind of evens the playing field on every hand, and should not be an indicator of whether or not you should stay in a hand or fold.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. That's a good way of thinking about it. Well, I know, Jake, I know you got to head out of here. If folks want to learn more about mixed games, they can go to rec.poker. We're a free online poker learning community. We do lots of stuff in real life too, but it's just easier to get together online these days. So go get a free account at rec.poker and head on over to unshuffled.io and get a sense of all the fun you can have over there. And it's not just mixed games. We talk about mixed games here a lot on this particular part of the show, but you can really, you can play any game there. That's one of the benefits of the great program you've got going there, and it is a lot of fun. So I encourage folks to go check that out. All right. Well, any other thoughts before we head on out of here? Well, I want to thank Eric and Kathy for coming and dropping some knowledge on us and brightening the conversation. Jake, I look forward to this every month. Next month is going to be June, and we're going to be talking about stud 8 or better. So we're still in 8 or better land, but we're going to talk about stud instead. And that's going to be some fun too.
I look
Thank
forward to
you.
every week as well. It's a highlight of the month for me. So it's a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
That's awesome. All right. Well, good night, everybody. Thanks
Good
again,
night.
and have a good month until then. Bye-bye.
See y'all.
Thanks, Jake.